Welcome to our podcast with researchers on designing games by and for the public. I am Antti Knoutas, your host from LUT University. With me, I have Professor Laura Ripamonti from University of Milan and Professor Annika Wolf from LUT University. The topic is to talk about what are the game design characteristics for games that are to be played by the public. Let's start with the introductions. Laura, would you like to tell us a bit more about your background?
Yeah, thank you. I'm currently associate professor at the University of Milan, Department of Computer Science, but I have a background in engineering. I am the scientific responsible and one of the founders of Pong that focuses on the innovation of games. Together with Professor Maggiolini, we created the first master course for computer scientists on the development design of video games back in 2010. Since then, I am teaching technical game design and master students in computer science.
Would you like to say a couple of words about your research background?
I'm Annika Wolf from LUT University, as Antti mentioned. My research interest is very much around data, specifically open data sets and how to engage the public in open data, particularly through the use of games. I've been focusing in past years through initially a smart city project and then later in other research on urban data games and how to get people to make sense or help people make sense of these data sets.
In our laboratory, we have always worked on innovation in video games. In particular, in this moment, we are focusing on two main aspects. That is to say, trying to foresee the dynamic evolution of stress while people playing in order to adapt dynamically the content to the level stress of the player.
And lastly, I'm your host, Antti Knoutas, and I'm also associate professor at LUT University. I'm working on civic technology and civic engagement. As one of our efforts, we are looking into how games could make this process more accessible or more structured. Let me put the first topic on the table. Why design with the players matter?
Okay, it's the very core of game design. When you are designing a game, you are always designing something, an artifact that is meant to be interactive and that has to entertain people. Typically, you are addressing a specific audience, then we will take the problem of involving the general public. But let's stick to what is done currently in the world of video games. So you have a certain type of audience with its own preferences, his expectations in terms of what they will find in the game. So the best way to achieve success while developing a game is involving representative of your target audience in the whole process of the design, development of the game since the very beginning. And the more accurate you are in selecting those samples of people that will help you with playtesting, giving feedbacks and so on, the more the game will be probably successful with people. This, obviously, we can talk for hours, but the very essence of the importance of involving people in development of game is this.
So Annika, why co-development matters?
I think it's established that when you design with people, then you can end up with something that meets their actual needs and their requirements much better than if you try to imagine what those requirements are for yourself. And I think that co-design happens at two stages when you're talking about game design. I think on the one hand, what is gameful and meaningful to people can vary. So you need to identify and co-design those game elements with people. And then you can then have a game which can be utilized to then further design, for example, services or smart apps or whatever it can be in a way that you can help to upskill them maybe quite rapidly in terms of understanding what data is and what data can do in the context that I normally design around data, but in a way that doesn't feel like it's too much like a tutorial or too heavy learning if you're then going to require people to then also give their insights into the apps and services that they want and need. So I think it's a way of lowering the barrier to participation into co-design.
Now, could you mention one example on that? You have a history of urban data games, among other things, that are played a lot like these, like commonly known and very popular location-based games nowadays, but when you were pioneering things, they were not quite as common.
One example is I've created one board game to help people to understand what data can be used for. And it's meant to get people comfortable and familiar with the idea of data and open data specifically in advance of them designing smart apps and services. It's been used in quite a few settings. It's been used with people as young as 13, 14, very successfully. And the first stage in that is to play data bingo, and that's a way of familiarizing people to the different types of data that are available in the game. For example, noise sensor data or data from crowdsourced data from photographs and these kinds of things. So first they play this data bingo and become familiar with different data sets. And then they have a board game where they can try to solve different challenges through data and telling what type of data they should collect and where they should collect it from. The board game itself is in form of a map, so they can collect from urban areas or rural areas, depending on what the task is, and they take the task from a playing card. And that's been used quite successfully. Just takes about half an hour to do both the data bingo and the board game, and then they start to design apps using different data types. So that was one early example of mine.
Sounds pretty cool. Thanks for sharing. And Laura, earlier on we discussed about your experience about arranging these large game showcases and, let's say, engaging in public in your department's effort. Could you share one example or any lessons learned about large public events?
Okay, more than one example comes to my mind. But first of all, a small introduction of the events, the type of events that you were mentioning. We are always engaged also the industry in the didactic aspects, teaching how to develop games. In particular, we set up an event that takes place each year, basically, during which students are participating to a contest, showcasing their games to the industry. So by setting up this type of events, we are also creating connections with economical reality of our territory, because we are involving the industry, we are involving people, we had events that were open to the public, so we had a huge participation of common people to the events. So that's another interesting aspect. Then we have, just thinking to the major drop effects, we have also an effect on the whole institution, I think, because, for example, last year we had the celebration for the centenary of our university, and the closing event of the whole celebration that lasted 1 year was basically related to us, in the sense that the students of my course have been asked to develop this prototype related to the history of the foundation of our university. So they had to perform also some historical researches in order to create the games. And then those games were presented to the public together with the people from the research side and people from the data side in the main seat of the university. And we invited the high school's students. So we have a huge participation of people and a real connection with the territory, because we had the research organization that is to say the university, the history of the city, because that was the focus of the day, the industry, because we have two big names that were there together with us that explained what does it mean to work in the industry to students, the students of the high school and our students too.
And what is your experience, Annika, when the game design encounters the reality? You have to, for the first times, or you are able to show it to the public, like whether in design or showcases, or alternatively show it to the other stakeholders?
My experience in everything related to engaging end users or the general public with anything, games or other co-design toolkits, is that expect the unexpected. Essentially, all the planning that you can do and all the things that you think you can predict, they don't work out in reality. So you have to have something which is very flexible. You get people that are very obedient and will do just what you've told them to because you've told them to, but then you'll get people that start to riff. So you need to have something which is riffable, which the purpose of any of these games is not that people play it in the way that you tell them to or that they follow the rules. The purpose of the game is that it's a conversation starter. So I think that facilitation becomes really important and critical at that point, that you don't start to tell people, okay, you're not playing this correctly, you're doing it wrong, and can you go back and do it this way? I think you have to follow the conversation, and if you can use the game to get the conversation back on track, then do that. But if the game has fostered interesting conversations and people are now focused on this rather than playing, then that's actually a very positive thing. So I think that the facilitation style is really important when you put a game in front of people, that you don't dictate too much about how they should use it. And I use a lot of card sets as well, and those can be used in usually various ways. And I've seen very unexpected things from people using the cards, but positively, not negatively, positively unexpected things. And I think that's the strength of these games, is that they are not actual games that you play with a goal to win and so on necessarily, but they are something to get people talking and focusing on the topic at hand and learning together and discussing together.
Thanks. To the next part, where we can discuss some of the state-of-the-art technologies that our departments have been looking into. Researchers do push the limits of technology and design after all. Annika, you have been doing a lot, but one area that we have been looking into and you have been looking into is open data or sensors or IoT as part of these games. On that sector, would you have any technology advancements, challenges, or lessons learned to share?
Some of that's in the early stages. I have ideas of using, for example, AR glasses, and there's been some initial tests done to engage with data in the wild. I know that somebody data capture in the past, where it was an actual device you had to carry with you, and you could automate, you could actually then search for using the data capture to see what data was available, and it was engaging people with things like health statistics and things that could be easily scraped. And that got mixed results. And I think that one of the reasons for the mixed results from the paper that I read on that was that people had to actively go and think to take the device out and search. If you imagine a world where people are using these kind of smart glasses, augmented reality enabled glasses, that data could be pushed to you based on the context. So there was some small experiments done around Loot, for example, to engage people with data from gym occupancy and bus timetables and canteen food that was available. And again, that kind of got mixed results, and I think the technology isn't quite there yet. So most of my work in this area has been based on more kind of game type things and also card games. So I've been working a bit with data comics a few times and card games that help you to explore, curate the data in playful ways and also gameful ways. And then you've got very simple game mechanisms like guessing if the data is bigger or smaller in the next week. So is there more noise pollution in this week than the previous week, and so on, and trying to get to the end of a month by guessing the data and these kinds of things. So just playful ways of engaging people with these more complex data sets, but they take a bit of effort to curate. So automating it and doing it through digital technology is something I'm very interested in, but haven't yet explored fully.
Yeah, so could one say that high tech has possibilities, but there is a reason why the great public still plays board and card games. Laura, if I remember correctly, your students start by exploring so-called pure game mechanism by playing these card games very rapidly before going to the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. In my opinion, there is no difference between a video game and a board game. It's a game. It's just a medium that changes. So if we analyze how games are built, the building blocks are essentially the same, independently from the media. Then the media can give you some things. So it's not a question of the type of technology, but the structure of the game and the structure of the metaphor that the game uses in order to deliver a certain experience that matters. Then, as I was saying before, each type of audience has its own preferences, expectations, and so on. Also in terms of media, probably a younger generation representative select a video game, while some older people will prefer a board game, but essentially it's the same. Actually, I'm teaching to my students how to build games. Then they have to build a prototype of game. The ethics of game design they learn is independent from the medium. A game is composed by some formal elements, resources, rules, procedures, number of players, type of conflict, challenge, and so on. You have many building blocks that you can use to build a game. Then you can choose either to go for a video game or for a board game. Obviously, you have different type of constraints. Also, for example, the number of players, you cannot have a board game, for example. But in my opinion, there's no difference.
Okay, we've had a good discussion, so let's move on to wrap up and some key takeaways. Would you have any advice on engaging communities through play or empowering these communities for new researchers who are interested in the topic?
My advice is to whatever you are thinking and dreaming up, your first attempt is never going to be correct. It's going to be far too complicated. I think it's to start with your best ideas and then break it down to something the most simple and then build it up from there, because in reality, people don't have a lot of time in these events where they're doing co-design to engage or learn new concepts. So it cannot have anything too complicated. It has to be something that they can just pick up and do. And usually our first ideas are far too complicated. So I think just iterating and testing with people, I think, is the key. But also testing with the right people. Don't go and test your games with a games club, for example. They're going to be looking for whether you have proper games mechanics, and they have so much knowledge about what a game should be. And it's not really a game in that traditional sense that you are putting in front of people. Be careful who you test with. Don't test with other researchers. They tend to overthink things. Test with the general public. That's my advice.
Thanks. And Laura, any final advice for researchers or experts who have become interested in game design or trying to build a game first time with the public?
First of all, it is important to underline, in my opinion, that a game is not only an interactive artifact that provides an experience, and this is the first thing that you have to keep in mind, which is the type of experience that you want to deliver to the player, but also that a game is always a multidisciplinary artifact. So you cannot simply tackle the design or creation of a game from just the perspective, of the technology or strictly of the game design, but you have to take into consideration many other aspects like the art, music, the type of sounds, history. It depends again on the game. Approach the design of game with an open mind and try to see everything in terms of systems. Games are systems that dynamically evolve to provide experiences. So try to put yourself in the shoes of your public, in this case, the great public, and try to figure out what will be attractive for them, trying also to cluster them in subclasses. Everybody's different. So it is simply not so useful, in my opinion, to address the average citizen, because nothing is like the average. Try to figure out which are the main, at least, categories of citizens you have, and try to put in the game that could be attractive for each different category. That could be a viable way, in my opinion, to try to attract the largest possible number of people.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think there is an anecdote, probably not historically factual, but they tried to make a suit for astronauts, averaged the height of all of the astronauts, and in the end, it fit no single person.
Exactly the point.
Yeah. With this, we are closing our broadcast. Many thanks for our guests, Laura Ripamonti, Annika Wolf. You will find our guests' research profiles and other links to our project from the podcast description. Thank you for listening.